Welcome to Make It Sew, a beginner sewing series by SureFit Designs. I'm Glenda, sometimes referred to as Glenda the Good Stitch. In this particular lesson, I'm going to talk about an elastic application for the waistline and how to finish it without a waistband. This can be done with either a woven fabric, as I've shown here in this little girl's skirt, and we'll take a quick look at the inside. That's what it looks like. The fabric itself doesn't stretch, but the elastic, of course, does. Here is another application done in a pair of pajama pants, and again, done out of a woven fabric. It's just a simple build up, turn over, and have the elastic sewn in place. And of course, it is the application that I use when I make my leggings. So here's a pair of my winter leggings, where now both the fabric stretches as well as the elastic. I also have this same application on the mannequin here with a pair of leggings, and it's just a 1-inch piece of elastic that is turned to the inside. Now let's talk about elastic for a moment. Everybody always wants to know, how much do you reduce the elastic from your waist circumference in order to get it to fit you properly? Well, that's a really, really good question, because depending on whether the elastic is knit or woven, it's going to change how much it stretches and how wide the elastic is. This very narrow elastic, 1/8 inch wide, this stretches a lot, and I use that when I'm doing a shearing technique, actually like I've done in the sleeve of this garment right here. This elastic is about, 3/8 of an inch wide, and this is a lingerie elastic. Again, it's got lots and lots of give to it. It's very soft because for lingerie or sleepwear, you want something soft against your body. This elastic is a 2-inch wide elastic, and it doesn't bend at all. This is one that I use in the waistbands for my yoga pants. And you can see that I really need to bend on that. I need to push it really hard in order to get it to crinkle even a little bit. Well, with this one, I'm not going to take out anywhere near the amount of elastic that I would in a 1-inch wide piece. So here's a 1-inch wide piece of elastic, and you can see it's got a lot of give to it. And so what you're going to do, actually here's one more sample. This is 1.5 inches wide, and you can see that this is a much softer elastic. You see how that bends? Well, it bends, and it's something you're going to have to take more of your total circumference out of. So the best way to test this is to take your waist measurement and subtract at least 2 inches. So that's what I've done in this piece right here, is my waist measurement minus 2 inches. And I've put a pin right there. Then I'm just going to make a complete circle like this, and I'm going to take a safety pin, and if I can, get it through the elastic, and that is going through. Some of these elastics are really, really tough to get a safety pin through. And then what you do, if I can get the pin closed, there we go. Now what you're going to do is take that circumference and you're going to pull it up over top of your hips, up to your waistline, and you're going to see if that's comfortable on you. So the more diamond-shaped hip you are, the more, of course, that elastic has to stretch to go over top of your diamond-shaped hips. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that once you've got this in the sewing process, as you sew thread into this, as you pump thread into this, it seems to get rid of some of the elasticity in your pants. So typically what happens is when you've got this finished being sewn, it always feels a little bit bigger than when you tried it on your body in the testing stage. So sometimes what I would do is just take out maybe 1/2 inch more. But that's really something that you've got to test on your body and just see how it feels. So here's a piece that I've cut for my sample that I'm going to sew for you today. And what I'm going to do now is show you a really interesting way to butt the edges of your elastic up together so that you don't have bulk. I know a very typical way to insert elastic at the waistline is to take your elastic and overlap it about 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and then stitch across, down, across, and up. but that gives a very, very bulky edge to the inside. So what I prefer to do is butt the ends together. And to stabilize them, I'm going to take a piece of, well, muslin would work, a very, very firmly woven cotton, something without any stretch at all. And then I'm going to set that on one edge, and you can see I've just cut that stabilizing piece just a little bit wider than what my elastic is. And I'm going to put a pin right here, and then I'm going to put a pin right here, and I'm going to make sure that I don't have any twists in the elastic. So that's a circle right there. And now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew the edges together. And I'm going to go right down the center, and then I will do some maneuvering to get a little square made there. Again, I'm going to be using a contrasting color of thread, and I'm going to also put my machine on zigzag. And so I want it to go back and forth, and I want the width of my zigzag to be a little bit wider than the default is, to make sure that I can go right across from one edge to the other, from one of my cut edges to the other. And I will remove my pin in just a moment here. I just want to make sure my zigzag stitch is wide enough. And it is wide enough if I just get it centered properly. There we go. And I do want to back stitch. And I am doing this, of course, in a contrasting color again, so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. And I need to have my needle in the down position. So let's get that happening. There it's stopped down. Now I'm going to raise the presser foot up. I'm going to pivot, and because the needle is in the down position, it's going to pop my needle over to this other side. So I'm going to hand wheel the needle up. You saw the needle just pop over. Now I'm going to reposition this underneath the presser foot so that it stitches right on the edge of the fabric and on the edge of the elastic. And I'm only going to go for about, 3/8 of an inch. Now I'm going to raise the presser foot up again. I will pivot the whole thing towards me, and I'm going to come up to this edge, stop with the needle in the elastic, pivot, and once again I'm going to fall off that edge. So I'm going to raise the needle up, move the elastic in, and then start stitching again. I want to go approximately, about 3/8 of an inch onto this side of the center, whereas where I started, and that just flipped out. And I'll just put it back in place there. And now I'll go like this. Now I typically get to a corner, I'll pivot, and I'm going to do a diagonal all the way across, stop with the needle in the down position, and I'm going to come down this direction again, stop with the needle in the down, and now I'm going to go a diagonal across this way. And then I will back stitch to secure that. And now I will cut this. I know I've put a lot of thread in there, and I'll come over here to trim this, but it's going to hold it very, very stable. So when I start tugging on this, like it has to come over some hips to get up to your waistline, you can see that it's held very, very securely. And now what I'm going to do is trim away this excess stabilizer. Being careful not to cut any of those threads. So now I've got a really good join on the elastic. Then I've got my sample prepared here, and this was leftover fabric from those leggings I have on the mannequin. And this is my center front, and I can always tell center front because it's typically your shorter crotch seam, and there's the remainder of the back crotch coming around the other side. So that's center front right here. There is center back, and I don't have side seams on this because it was a one-piece legging. So what I do is I take my center front and center back together, and you can put in a pin, or you can do what I've done there is put in a chalk marking. That's the one side, and we'll just mark this other side as well. And now I'm ready to put the elastic in place, or at least get it started. But before I do, I'd like to just point out to you that in the SureFit Designs Pants Kit instruction book, on page, let me get there, it's page 24. I've got my marker here. There we go. And on page 24 of your Pant Kit instruction book, it shows you how to build up the waist edge of your pattern in order to accept the elastic. The amount that you build up that waist edge is going to be determined on the width of your elastic. So you do need to decide that first of all. Okay, so I've got this pinned and I've basically turned it into quarters. And now what I'm going to do is the same thing on the elastic. There's one of my seams, and I usually put my join seam at the very back, at center back. So I'm going to just fold that in half, and I'm going to take my chalk and chalk the quarter mark there, or the halfway mark, and now I can take that halfway mark with this one, and I'll put a chalk mark here, and a chalk mark here. So now I've done quartering. I've put this into quarters just like the waist edge is into quarters. Now take the center back of your pants, of the elastic I should say, and place it onto the center back of your pants, and you're going to pin the edge of the elastic right along the edge of the fabric, and then you'll take this quarter mark and put it to this quarter mark, and I've just pinned it upside down, but that's okay, I know exactly where it is. And there's the quarter mark right there, because you can see that white chalk mark. Then this is the center front, so I'll take that quarter mark and put it to this one. And then I'll take the other quarter mark and put it to this other quarter mark. So I've basically done what's called pin and quartering, and it's all ready to go. Now, what you're going to be doing when you put this in the machine is stretching both layers together as you sew. I also typically start at the back of my project so that all my finishing stitches are less visible when they're in the back of your body. So we'll take this to the sewing machine. I am on zigzag, and I think I'll just leave it at the stitch length and width that I've got. And so I'm setting the needle down into the elastic edge, and I'm going to get a really good start. And notice that I didn't start right on the seam. I don't want to do that. I want to start back a bit, and I'm actually going to back stitch this about 2 or 3 stitches, and then I'm going to come forward. And when I do this elastic application, I always put my needle in the down position, because I am going to be stopping and pulling on both sides, because I want to stretch this elastic to fit. And I'm going to remove that pin, and now what I'm going to start doing is pulling in the back and pulling in the front. So I need to grab hold of the back of this, I need to grab hold of the front of it, and I need to stretch as I sew. And again, because I'm using this white contrasting thread color, you should be able to see exactly what I'm doing. So I'm attaching the top edge of the elastic to the top edge of the fabric in a zigzag stitch. Now I'm getting up to where I have to release my hands. So you can see I've stopped with the needle in the down position. I'm just letting it relax. I'm going to pull more towards me, and I'm going to again grab I don't want to take that pin out of that quarter mark just yet. So I'm just going to grab behind and in front and zigzag the elastic in place. Now I'm getting up to the quarter mark. I am going to release that because I need to, again, reposition all my fabric and the elastic. And I'm going to stretch as I sew. And I like to stop always with my needle on the inside. Well, I guess you can call that the inside. It's the inside of the pants. And then I'll remove that pin. And now I'm going over this one seam. And you can see I'm pulling away from my edge of my fabric here, and that's not good. So I'm just going to reposition. And you can definitely do that. You can stop as many times as you need to reposition this. I'm coming up to the pin, so I'm stopping with the needle in the elastic. I'm going to remove that pin, and now I'm heading around towards the back side. And again, make sure your cut edge of your fabric is on the edge of the elastic. And I will back stitch here and then come forward and raise the needle up. And that finishes off the first row of zigzag stitching right here. And so this is what it looks like. And that all turned out really quite well. Now, the next row of stitching is going to be done as you fold this over. So from here, I'm turning the elastic to the inside, and again, I like to start at the back. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to make sure that that seam allowance is right on the seam allowance, and hopefully it stays there. When you start stretching, these things do tend to move. And then I'll pin at the quarter mark. And I'm using my fingers to really roll this nice and tight over top of that elastic. And I usually pin halfway in between the quarter marks as well. Sometimes my pins do come out, but that's just something that I live with because I'd rather have more pins than not enough to hold this in place. What you don't want is you don't want this buckling up like that. So that's why I put in enough pins to get this going. Okay, so there's the back of the pants, and I am going to now have this all positioned right underneath the presser foot like this. Now, one of the things that I like to do is make my zigzag stitch wider this time. So I'm going to be zigzagging from here, and I want to make sure that I go all the way over. So I'm just going to give this 2 millimeters more in width, and I'm going to pull this pin a little bit out of the way, and I'm going to start, since my needle is on the left side of the zigzag, I'm going to start on the right on that cut edge of the top edge of the pant fabric. And again, I'm going to do a couple of stitches. I'm going to back stitch, and then I'm going to come forward. And again, I'm going to be stretching as I go, and I want to make sure that I've got my needle in the down position. There we go, and it stopped in the down position. Now I'm going to remove my pins as I sew, and this time I'm just going to be making sure I've stretched the fabric really well over top of that elastic. And once again, I'm stretching as I sew to cover up that edge of my previous stitching. And you do need to stop and turn, and this is why it's so important to have your needle stop in the down position so that you're not losing any of that fabric position. Well, you likely heard the clunk, 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 so something went wrong with my stitching. And it actually was the top thread that broke. So even with us professionals, we still do have little oopses and accidents. So at this point in time, I'm going to take this out and let me just remove this. And of course, the needle has come unthreaded and I've got only that much left to stitch. So I would, in fact, I would pick out the bad parts there, and I would put my needle in and I would stitch back up to there. And the reality is nobody's likely ever going to know the difference. But what you can see here is basically a really, really easy process for inserting your elastic. And this is one way to sew an elastic in. There are other ways to make a casing and just feed your elastic in by putting like a safety pin on the end and feeding your elastic through the casing. But I did want to show you this stitched in way. And usually it does work very, very well. But as I say, even with professionals, we do end up having problems now and again. And one of the things that you should become very familiar with is your seam ripper, because this is going to be your very best friend. After all these years of sewing, this still happens to all of us. Thank you so much for watching this Make It Sew series, and I do hope you continue. If you're not already a part of the Sure-Fit Designs community, I do invite you to join us. And it's just 3 simple and very easy steps. Number 1, go on over to surefitdesigns.com and join our newsletter list. And when you join, you're going to end up with free Getting Started gifts. Number 2, make sure you like this video by using the subscribe button and the like button right below it. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/SureFitDesigns. And thirdly, join our community, go to Facebook. We've got a Sure-Fit Designs page and a Sure-Fit Designs user group page where people from all over the world are interacting with one another. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.